Welcome back to part 3 of the river table construction. Part 2 left off with pouring the epoxy into the mold, and so here we are 2 weeks later extracting the table from the mold. The mold was assembled with plywood, Tyvek tape, and a lot of screws, and wax with a glue gun. There were a lot of screws to remove, and some of the screws were kind of hard to see because they were embedded in the plywood. You gotta have an impact wrench. The impact wrench is an indispensable tool. One more screw to go. And it just pops off. That Tyvek tape works really great. The epoxy does not stick to the Tyvek tape at all. The table was flood poured about a 1/4 inch deep over the top of the redwood. I did that in order to give the redwood a armor plating. Most tables are built with hardwood and they fill the river with epoxy, but they don't bother to cover the wood with epoxy. Instead, they sand it smooth and then give it a coating of Rubio monocoat or something like that to shine it up, and then rely on the hardness of the wood itself to be durable. But redwood is really soft and would be I feared would be easily damaged, especially as a dining table. So I decided to armor coat the redwood by flood pouring the epoxy over the top of it. And so the epoxy is about a 1/4 inch deep over the top of the wood. And of course the table itself, top to bottom, is about 2.5 inches thick. This end cap was stuck mainly by the wax, the paraffin wax from the glue gun that was holding it in place. This being my first large table, one of my concerns was that the table would adhere to the plywood base of the mold. But fortunately that did not happen, as you'll see in a minute. This is the fourth side coming off. So you can see the river table, it's got 1 inch of blue and then about 1.25 inches of clear. And so that's what allowed me to put the scallop shells and corals and things like that in the river. I realized the best way to break it loose was to slide the plywood off the workbench and then push down on the plywood, so the plywood would bend downward and that would pop the table loose from the plywood, as opposed to trying to lift the table up. That way it didn't stress the table. And there it is, loose. So the next step is to sand it smooth. Some shops sometimes will put their table through a large industrial planer to flatten it, but in this case, since I flood poured the epoxy, gravity had already flattened it. But the epoxy, as it cures, it shrinks a little bit and ripples, and so sanding smoothed that out. The table weighs about 150 pounds, so this is me trying to flip it. There you can see, there's my wife helping me. Thank you. I was afraid to lower it myself because I was afraid it'd get away from me and crash, so she helped me. This is our first look at the bottom of it. I decided to give the edges a 45-degree bevel, a small bevel. It's only about half an inch or so width of the bevel at a 45-degree angle. And so I did that with the router, and another neighbor came over to see what the heck I was doing. One thing about that router is that as you're routing the edge, it sprays flakes of epoxy everywhere. It's a big mess, and I'm still cleaning it up weeks later. This was me turning the table by myself. It's just about crushed me. I had to flip it over in order to bevel the bottom corner, the bottom edge. So I used a sheet of plywood as a fence to hold to press the router against the fence, and that way I could bevel a straight line. And as you can see, the flakes of epoxy accumulating, flying everywhere and accumulating. It's a big mess. But I was really happy with how the bevel came out. Now what I'm doing turned out to be a mistake. The table surface, after sanding it, it gives it kind of a smoky finish, and I wanted a clear finish. And I thought, well, the best way to do that is to recoat it. So I mixed up another coat of epoxy and painted it on. And here's a look at the bevel. I was really happy with that bevel. It's really pretty. But when I painted that coat of epoxy on there, it restored the clarity that I was looking for, but little bits of dust landed on it and made a horrible result. So instead I found another video which I'll link to. There's a button above on how to do this. I followed the procedure I found in this other video and polished the table, and it came out just great. It involved sanding again with a 220 grit and working up through 11 iterations up to 8,000 grit, and then using this 3M buffing compound, parts 1, 2, and 3, and buffing it 3 different times. I didn't document this fully in this video because there's another video that does that very well, which I will link to. But the result was beautiful, as you just saw. It came out crystal clear. I was really happy with that. Now I decided it was time to move it into the house. This table is being built for our own house, and I was planning to try to carry the table in or something, and I was afraid that we would drop it because it's so heavy. And then it occurred to me, my workbench is on wheels. We'll just wheel it in. So the first thing I had to do was hose off all those flakes from the routing the beveled edges, and then I got my next door neighbor to help me push it up the ramp into the house. And this turned out to be a little bit of a challenge. I didn't want to go straight up the ramp. I had covered it with cardboard and the blanket to keep the sun off of it, so I was afraid the sun might warp it or something. But with effort, we managed to push it up this ramp. It rises about 4 feet.
Yeah.
Do it again. All right. There you are.
My wife is
There's enough room.
both helping steer the table and film at the same time.
All right, I got this. I got this end. We still may have to huff it.
Gotcha. back up a little bit.
I have another video on the construction of the workbench.
I gotta
It's
lift it.
just
No, I'll
been
lift it.
Oh, we got a little.
great. I'm really happy with it.
One more wheel.
So this is delivery of my first large river table
Then we got
into the house.
perfect.
Leg construction is the next thing coming.
Couldn't have done that by myself.
But for now, it's just riding on the workbench. Ah, there's the puppy. He wants to see what's going on.
Stop right here.
My sister did that artwork. It's needlepoint up on the wall there of the Chinese warrior on 2 horses.
There we are.
This was a big moment, the culmination of about a month of work.
Oh, it's got
The
a good-
river in the river table has got phosphorus mixed into it, so it glows in the dark.
Nice
So
job.
at night, when the lights are turned out, the river has an eerie bluish glow. It's really pretty in the dark.
How many, 220 to 80.
220 to 600.
The polishing of the
800,
epoxy
1,000,
came out
2,000,
really well. I was so happy with
3,000,
that.
4,000, 8,000. So 8
8
times. And then 3 times with 3 different bucking compounds. So 11.
I was telling my neighbor how
That really paid off.
the procedure followed to polish it.
I'm so happy with
Well, that.
And there we are. Now it's time for to build the legs. The first thing I had to do was build the box frame that will go underneath the table, and I decided the corners of the box frame would have a dovetail joint. The box frame is about 5 feet long, and I'm using a Porter cable router jig, and the workpiece goes vertically in it, and since the workpiece is 5 feet long, I had to have the router jig up high, and I have this railing. There's a landing in our garage, and so I mounted the jig on top of the railing, and I have to climb this ladder to get to it to operate it. And I also figured out that wearing a rain poncho works really great because the router sprays fine wood chips at you. And the first time I did that, the wood chips stuck to my clothes, and it was hard to clean off. And so the rain poncho solved that problem. And here's the frame that I built. This will be under the table when the table is standing on its legs. The frame's not quite finished yet. I hadn't detailed it yet, but that frame will go under the table, and the legs will mount. We'll be following soon. But this is where we are right now. Catch ya at part 4.